Whether you are working on a research paper for your blog or a website, or an article for a magazine or scientific conference, or a report for your boss, your final product will rise or fall based on the quality of your research. To research effectively, you must plan your project in advance so you can make the most efficient use of your time and resources. Effective research is as much about planning as it is about the research itself. In this talk, I will cover the topic how to be effective in research. So I split this question to organizing your project, finding good resources, writing your paper, citing your research, and proofreading. So let's start with the first part, organizing your project. Select a topic of personal interest to you and learn more about it. Sometimes the topic is assigned to you by your supervisor or by your boss. You can use the page requirement or limits as a guide to narrow your topic. The narrower your topic is, the more likely you will be to contribute something of value to the field. For example, robotics probably is too broad for a 20-page paper. If you know you want to write about robotics, narrow your topic to a particular feature in robotics or usage of robotics in different industry. And if still cannot come up with a topic to write about, ask experts, colleagues, friends in the field of study for advice. Set preliminary research goals. Setting goals can be done as stating the hypothesis or in terms of questions. As the hypothesis, mostly it's done for a science-based research project, and for the other type of research, for example, for blog, you're writing an article for your blog, so we use the goals in terms of question. And whatever is the purpose of that article, typically you will want to create a basic thesis statement for your final report. This is what you ultimately want your research to prove. Creating a thesis statement before you have even begun your research might seem backwards, but to research effectively, you need to know what you are looking for. And keep in mind that you can adjust your thesis statement later if your research shows that it is inaccurate or inappropriate. Assess the overall scope of your project. To accurately plan the scope of your project, think about who you are and why you are doing this research. If you are doing research for a blog, your scope will be more limited than if you are attempting to unearth a new discovery or theory in a particular field. Essentially, the scope of your project is how far you are going to go. The scope of your project may be dictated to you, for example, through an assignment by your supervisor. Keep your scope in mind as you are planning your research strategy. You do not want to bog down in your research or spend time on irrelevant information. Discard something that does not fall within the scope of your project. Identify possible sources. Target your research by figuring out what types of sources will be helpful to you and potentially have information you need for your project. Understanding the types of sources you will need helps you make the most efficient use of your research time. For example, if you are doing research on atomic force microscope in contact mode of operation, surveys on utilization of AFM in robotics or in a non-contact mode probably isn't going to be helpful for you. Or if you are working on a political science or psychology research paper, so maybe statistics is relevant. Brainstorm keywords. Particularly if you are going to do a lot of research in internet, the keywords you choose will determine how successful your research is based on your general knowledge and early reading on your topic. Think of words that will get you the information you need. Try to make your keywords as specific as possible. For example, robotics is so general to understand about the kinematic of special robot manipulator. Gather your material. Before you out to research, you need a few basic items so you can take notes and organizing your thoughts. Effective research requires not just finding the information you need, but being able to put all the pieces together to complete a cohesive report. The next section is finding good sources. Search for primary sources. Whether a source is considered primary depends on its relation to the topic. The most effective research focuses on primary sources, which are documents or objects directly related to or involved in the subject of your research. For example, if you are doing research on COVID-19, articles from 2020 afterward would be considered primary sources. However, articles till even 2019 would not. Primary sources are the heart of your research. Databases and digital archives of primary sources often are only accessible by subscription. For example, IEEE ASME libraries, so you have to be a member in order to have access there. Take useful notes. As you are reading the sources that you have found, note taking is important. You do not want to have to read the same thing over and over again. Jot down a few words to indicate the idea or fact you found in that sources. The next part is fill in your research with secondary sources. Secondary sources are, as labeled indicates, second to primary sources. Typically, these are academics, journalists, or other researchers commenting or interpreting information related to your topic. Check dates on sources. When something was published can be a strong indicator of whether you should rely on it or not. Ideally, you should check the date of publication before you even read the material. Whether dates matter depends on the subject you are searching. For example, as an example I mentioned before, if you are researching on COVID-19, so the articles in 2000, so maybe it's not a good research. It's not a good resource for your research. But if you are working on the vibration of a cantilever, so the date does not have any influence on the research. Use quotation with tertiary sources. Tertiary sources go one level beyond secondary sources. Frequently, they are a summary of secondary sources, such as an encyclopedia article or a review in a scientific or academic journal. The next part, citing your research. Avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism means taking someone else's words and presenting them as though they are your own. To understand plagiarism, put yourselves in the author's shoes. They did a lot of efforts to publish that article. Give credit for sources. Always provide a citation for facts, things that can be proven true or false. This is so your reader can confirm the fact that you have presented in your report. The best source for a fact is always a primary source. You also should cite opinions, analysis that is not your own. Use the proper citation method. You can use the guide page to find out the method of citation. For example, if you are submitting your paper to the IEEE venue, so you can find the method related to the IEEE transactions. Quote and paraphrase responsibly. Generally, you only want to have a direct quote from a source when the words themselves are particular importance, or if the language is so original and succinct, it would be nearly impossible to phrase it better. For example, to be or not to be. So you can have it directly. Writing your paper. Begin by organizing the information you have collected. The next step is the rough draft, wherein you get your ideas on paper in an unfinished fashion. This step will help you organize your ideas and determine the form your final paper will take. After this, you will revise the draft as many times as you think necessary to create a final product. The final step is proofread. Read through the text and check for any errors in spelling, grammar, and punctuation. Make sure the sources you use are cited properly. Make sure the message that you want to get across to the reader has been truly stated. To summarize, how to be effective in research, we have 8 steps. Step 1. Identify and develop your topic. Selecting a topic can be the most challenging part of research. Step 2. Do a preliminary search for information. Step 3. Locate materials. Step 4. Evaluate your sources. Step 5. Make notes. Step 6. Write your paper. Step 7. Cite sources properly. And finally, step 8. Proofread. These materials that I've shown you are taken from the Wikipedia, WikiHow, and the University and HCC. So thank you very much and do an effective research.